maybe. She grabs onto on purpose, so I can't take her out the chair. Okay. My fault. My fault. Alright. Whew. Alright. Game time, motherfuckers. I might just put something else on. Like my black onesie. Don't give me one second, okay?
Oh wait.
Enemigo descendiendo sobre la zona. Se acabó la práctica. Empieza el combate real. Sobrevive para redesplegar a los compañeros caídos. Mata para hacerlo más rápido. Marca un punto. Hostiles dropping into the area. Watch the skies.
Marking enemy.
Bounty targets identified. You are clear to engage.
Hostile UAV in this sector.
No, porque no tengo, yo todavía no tengo.
Moving here.
Sí, viene,
Got a
viene.
vehicle marked.
Alguien tiene caleta, güey. Ay, atrás de mí,
Dropped one.
¡Ah, la verga! De abajo, güey.
Hostile UAV.
Hay un franco en el bajo, güey. Ahí va para allá arriba, güey.
Enemy dropping into the AO.
Ahí donde maté, güey, donde maté.
Well done.
They tagged me!
Vanya, hostiles deploy the counter UAV.
Este, güey, este es el franco, güey.
You have reinforcements inbound. Gas is inbound. Your squad mate's back on station. Good work.
Entonces, si hay un...
Marking enemy.
y dos, güey. Ahora son dos equipos.
Enemy movement.
Aguas, son dos. Arriba.
Enemy down.
Ahí viene su compa.
Marking enemy. Moving here.
Fuck off. Can you come here or no?
Hostiles dropping into the area. Watch the skies.
Hostile counter UAV is active.
Contract failed. Time's expired. Marking your dog tag. Move to resecure it.
Para el. Atrás de mi puta madre.
Marking enemy.
Y marca ahí se mató uno, güey.
Hostile UAV overhead. Throwing grenade.
We're detecting vulnerability in the enemy's network. Locate their uplink stations and secure their intel before they go offline.
¿Lo bajaron?
Enemy wounded.
Ah, no lo bajé, güey. Ya lo bajé. Punto, güey.
Hostile counter UAV overhead.
Avanza.
Enemy movement.
Ya. Así ve.
I got you. I got you.
Your squad mate is redeploying. Well done.
Wounded.
Del carro su
Vehicle
pa.
marked. Throwing grenade.
Son dos, güey, son dos.
Enemy here!
Gas is moving.
Need medical!
Ah, sí.
Cover your dog tag to restore your honor.
Ah, perro, lleva 5, maldito perro desgraciado.
Enemy.
Puta madre, se va a caer ahí contigo, güey. ¿Y otra arma?
Marking enemy.
Your squad mate's back on station. Good work. Secure the uplinks before we lose network access.
Hostile UAV in this sector. Moving here. Cancel that.
O verde.
Marking
Enemy
enemy.
soldier incoming. their network.
Ah, me maté yo. Estoy bien feliz.
Enemy move. Marking enemy.
Quiero entender. Neta.
Moving here. Marking enemy.
No ibas a hacer algo. Claro.
Surgeons is about to end. Make it count. Enemy dropping into the AO. You have reinforcements inbound.
¿Sí se cansado o no?
Squadmates is redeploying. Well done. You got gas moving in.
La madre, güey.
Moving here.
Some of your team is still outside the field. Your squad mates back on station. Good work.
Sí, güey. A ver si se sigue. Mucha gente aquí,
Resurgence is closed. No more second chances.
Oye, ahí enfrente.
Enemy movement. Left strike. Vehicles here. Gas is closing in.
No mames, güey.
Move to the safe zone.
Me cegaron. ¿Tú viste? ¿Sí viste que me cegaron? Ay, santo Dios, santo Dios. Ay, santo Dios. Muchas gracias por arriba de ti. No hablo por la zona de proximidad. Por zona de proximidad. Aquí eso, enfrente, justo se acaba de meter.
Too close, man.
You're losing ground.
What's
done.
up? Come on. Yo tengo cállate
Less than 10
tu
were
pendejo.
standing. They hit us hard
Puta,
that time.
ese no va.
Warm up while you can. We will deploy soon. Moving! Hostiles dropping into the area. Watch the skies. Enemy soldier incoming. Practice is over. The real fight begins now.
Jump in 5, get ready!
Stay alive to keep your squad in the fight. Sir, we can put out C here! Andiamo! Enemy dropping into the AO.
Hostile UAV overhead. Hostiles moving in the airstrike. Marking your dog tags.
Move to resecure it. Learn from the loss. Failure is a wise teacher.
What's up guys, I'm Mike Sasser and I'm excited to bring you another tutorial on, what's that? I haven't done any tutorials yet. This is my very first of hopefully many tutorials about things specific to boudoir. And I'm hoping that I can share some information let's play my very cool, still in its infancy, probably will change soon, intro. Hey, what camera do you use? Ah, nice. What lens was that shot on? We'll get into those later, but I think what's more important are the lenses that you use. Now there's 3 lenses that I have used to shoot boudoir. That is the 35mm 1.4, the 50mm 1.4, and the 85mm 1.8. And each of them have their strengths, but I currently shoot about 99% of my images on my 50mm. In fact, when I was going through pictures that I was going to use for this video, I actually had a really hard time finding images on my 35 and on my 85. So let's talk about the pros of each. The 35mm is an amazing lens. I love this focal length, it's super cinematic. It's really good for times when you're shooting in a really small space. I know a lot of photographers have to shoot in hotel rooms or second bedrooms or things like that, so the 35 is really amazing for that. It's an amazing lens to show your closeness to the subject, and it's a very personal lens for this reason. Sometimes it can feel like you can even reach through the picture to the subject. It's also a great lens for showing off the scene. If you're shooting in a studio that's really beautiful, if you're shooting outside that's really gorgeous, if you've got a setup that has a lot of details around, the 35 is really amazing because it can show off more of that scene. The only thing you have to watch out for with the 35 is the distortion that the lens creates if you get too close. Now the 85mm and longer focal lengths are used a lot in fashion photography, catalog photography, because they're designed to show that impact. Now I used to use this lens a lot more. The images were so loud, they were so present. It's also an incredible lens if you've got a really busy background, if you've got chords, really compresses that background and isolates your subject. So it's perfect for cleaning up unwanted things in the background. And I think sometimes this is the absolute best lens for headshots. Now I don't do a whole lot of headshots during my boudoir shoots, so I don't really use it that often, but if that's a big thing for you,
Enough training.
the negative that I see with the 85 is that when you look at a picture shot with it, it really does look like a camera. It has that impact. What it does for me is it takes it away from the person in the photo and places more importance on the aesthetic of how the image was created. You kind of look at the image and you go, whoa, instead of, wow, that's beautiful. And that's one of the things that I really love about the 50mm. I also think the 50mm is a super personal focal length. Because it removes the kind of what lens was that taken with look, you're able to pay more attention to the person in the photo and the overall photographic character of the image. And lastly, I love the 50 because it's just so versatile. If you get really close, you can make it kind of look like an 85. If you get further away, you can make it look like a 35. It just kind of is enough. So let's talk about the A9 briefly. So I used Canon for 4 years. I had a Canon 5D Mark IV before this, and it was a great camera. And honestly, if I didn't shoot video, I'd still be using it. I've used Sony cameras for video for the last 2.5 years. They're just better in every way until you upgrade to like the C100, which is an amazing camera, but still lacks things like built-in stabilization and super high frame rates. So, you know, pick and choose your battles. I can say since switching to the A9, my in-focus hit rate is a lot higher. My exposures are more accurate because of the EVF. I think the Zeiss glass is sharper. And now that I have only one camera for my photo and video, I'm shooting both a lot more because I have the camera in my hands at all times, and it makes it a lot easier to switch between the modes. Every so often I get a client that wants a boudoir video. It's something pretty unique to my business, and the Sony is just amazing for that. The 120 frames a second, the super fast autofocus. It's just really is built as a professional camera, not just for photos, but for video too. So I've linked a couple of my boudoir videos, as well as a link to a video to a course that I teach specifically on how to shoot boudoir video. So feel free to go check those out. All right guys, that wraps it up. I hope you guys learned something. I'd love to know what lenses you use for your boudoir shoots, so leave them down in the comments. And if there's anything else you want to learn, let me know in the comments and I'll try and put together a YouTube video specifically answering that question.
Moving here.
advised, there is an enemy squad hunting for you.
Jared Polinfrono's Photo.com, and this is a comparison between these three Canon cameras. We have the R8, the R6, and the R6 Mark II. The idea behind this video is to help you decide which one of these might be the right one for you if you're just starting out, but also if you already have an R6, should you upgrade to an R6 Mark II? And everything in this video is all from my real-world experience using each one of these cameras, because I've taken them out into the real world to shoot sports, portraits, videos, anything you can think of, we've done it with these cameras, and that's why this video is going to help you figure out which direction you should go. Now, let's jump right into the cameras, starting with the image sensors. The R8 has a 24.2 megapixel full-frame CMOS sensor powered by a Digic X processor. The Canon R6 has a 20.1 megapixel full-frame CMOS sensor powered by the same Digic X processor, and the R6 Mark II has a 24.2 megapixel full-frame CMOS sensor powered by, guess what, a Digic X processor. Now would be a good time to tell you that the R8 and the R6 Mark II basically have the same innards. That's right, they have the same sensor, they have the same autofocus. We'll get to all of that as we go through this video, but just understand that a lot of what I say about these two cameras is basically going to be exactly the same, which makes the R6 the one that is slightly different here. The R6 right here has an older sensor. It was the sensor from the 1DX Mark III with some tweaks. That was a high-end DSLR, and 20 megapixels in today's world is not that much, but you can get fantastic results with it. But the newer 24 megapixel sensor in both of these cameras is fantastic. These cameras are very similar across the board, and that's why we're going to go over the specs to help you figure this out. In terms of ISO, they have the exact same ISO sensitivity. We have 100 to 102,400 native, expandable up to 204,800. Now, I've recently used the R8 shooting basketball at 5,000 ISO indoors, and it's fantastic. I've pushed the R6 Mark II and the R6, and those are fantastic. You can really push these cameras much further, and of course, a lot depends on the lenses that you're using, because the more light that you let in, the lower you can drop the ISO versus using maybe bad lenses or terrible aperture lenses where you have to really raise that ISO. You're going to start to see some issues the higher you go. So far, I haven't given a check mark because there's not a lot of check marks to give, but from time to time, we will go and give some check marks in these cameras. Now let's talk about frame rate. The R8 shoots at 6 frames per second with a first curtain electronic shutter. That means it does not have a full shutter going in there anymore. Like the old cameras, like boom, you hit the button, you get a shutter. This is just first curtain shutter. But in terms of electronic shutter, you can shoot up to 40 frames per second. You can also dumb it down to 20 frames per second as well as 5 frames per second, and that's in 12-bit RAW. You have pre-shooting RAW burst mode, which was introduced in the R6 Mark II. You have high-frequency flicker mode, HDR moving subject mode, and a few other things. Now, I mentioned these because it's kind of the same exact thing that you find in the R6 Mark II, but the difference is you get 12 frames per second with a mechanical shutter. So you have the full mechanical shutter here. Now, I know I skipped over this. We're going to come back to that in just a second. But again, the R6 Mark II and the R8 are very similar, just with the R6 Mark II giving you the 12 frames per second with a full mechanical shutter, whereas you just have the 6 frames per second with the first curtain shutter in this bad boy. Now, moving on to the R6, you have 12 frames per second with the mechanical shutter and 20 frames per second with the electronic shutter in 12-bit RAW. You don't have the mode where you can knock it down to 5 frames per second with the electronic shutter, and you don't have 40 frames per second. Yeah, it's pretty insane to say that these two cameras give you 40 frames per second, which gives these each 40 check marks on the screen, which gives us 80 whole check marks. Dan, you can just put one big-ass check mark on the screen if that makes it easy. Here's where there is a difference between the R8, the R6 Mark II, and the R6. It's the readout speed of the sensor. You have a slightly slower readout speed of the R6. Now, the R6 for shooting sports, it's a fully capable camera, and you don't really see much of an issue with the jelloing shutter or some lag happening, but it is there. When the R6 Mark II came out to give you 40 frames per second, you are not really running into much of an issue with bowing or banding when it comes to shooting fast action. 40 frames per second is more than the Canon R3 does, which is a $6,000+ camera that only gives you 30 frames per second. Now, these are not stacked sensors. I didn't go into the details on that, but stacked sensors generally have a faster readout speed, which cuts down on the warping. For example, when you look at this tennis photo taken with the R6 Mark II, you can see that the tennis racket is warping because of the speed and the ball warps. But when you break out the R3 with a stacked sensor, you're not seeing it. But for most sports, I shot the R8 doing women's lacrosse. I did it with the Harlem Globetrotters, and I didn't really find any noticeable issues, which is fantastic when shooting 40 frames per second. Those are the differences. I think one of the biggest takeaways from this video is helping you decide, do you go with an R6 or do you end up going with an R8 at that point? Now, we're gonna get to all that by the very end, but I just wanna point out as much as I can here to help you make those decisions. Let me jump in here real quick because I want to show you this photo taken with the Canon R8 and edited with 11 of the presets from FroPak 3, starting with Zoolander, followed by Winnebago. Then we've got Walter White, Prestige Worldwide, Mount Airy, Mentos, King Contrast, Eckert, Capone, Canadian Tuxedo, and Fifth Element. But check out my favorite preset of all time called Skittles. Boom, one click, and that's how good Skittles looks. So look, if you're looking to speed up your raw workflow, give yourself a great starting point, or you're tired of presets just not working, ours work. We created 15 custom Lightroom presets that you can check out right now at froknowsphoto.com/FroPak3. While you're over there, you can play with the sliders to see the befores and the afters. If you decide to pick them up right now, they are currently on sale. Or you could save even more by getting the triple play bundle that includes FroPak 1, 2, and 3, as well as Skittles. Now, let's get back to the video. Now, let's move on to the focusing modes. I'm gonna read the R6 Mark II and the R8 together here because they're basically the same. They incorporate the AF system from the R3 with an improved deep learning engine for better subject tracking with improved stickiness, dual pixel AF2, IAF, human, animal, vehicle, horses, airplane, and train autofocus. It has all of those different modes in the R6 Mark II and the R8 for helping track those subjects. Now, where these two differ is you have a joystick on the back of the R6 Mark II, and you don't have a joystick on the R8. And in my shooting with the R8, I have not missed the joystick. It's quicker to use a joystick sometimes, but there is a D-pad on the back, and I can move my focusing point. Now, what's interesting here is that the R8 has something that the R6 Mark II doesn't have, and that's you touch the back of the LCD screen when it's up to your eye to select the subject eye or to select the subject that you want to, if you have multiple subjects in the frame. I'm assuming that a firmware update might add that to the R6 Mark II, but for now, you have the R8 having something that the R6 Mark II doesn't have. But remember, I said they have the R3's autofocus. I'm talking about a $6,000+ camera. To have the autofocus in these cameras match that is insane, and I can tell you that it comes close to matching it, if not matching it at this point. Across the board, it's fantastic. Now, the R6 has dual pixel AF2, IAF, human, animal, and vehicle AF. It doesn't have all of the same algorithms that the other two cameras have. It also doesn't borrow as much from the R3. Is it great autofocus? The answer is yes. It's fantastic autofocus. Is it better than the R8's autofocus? The answer is no. It's not better than the R8's focus. Is it better than this? No, obviously not, because it's the same in both of these cameras. You still get great autofocus across the board. It's just gotten better quicker at this point, so keep that in mind when you're making your decision. Now, here's where we will find some differences. The R8 has a burst rate of up to 56 RAW files. Now, that's if you're at 100 ISO only, because when you go to higher ISOs, you start to drop the amount of frames you can get per second when you're shooting at 40 frames per second. For example, when I was doing lacrosse outside, I got roughly 41 to 43 frames per second with a burst. That's like 1 second of shooting, by the way, so you can outrun the buffer in this camera fairly quickly within a second. Now, if you're shooting in lower light situations, you end up getting less frames per second because there's more data. All right, so that's what all that means. Now with the R6, you're getting 240 raw files in a burst. You're pretty much not going to outrun this. Part of that reason is you have the 20.1 megapixel sensor in this versus the 24. So you're not really going to outrun it, but you also have dual card slots in this bad boy. And the R6 Mark II is giving you 110 raw files. So you know what, Steven? We're giving a check mark right now to the R6, this old boy, which is, by the way, only 2.5 years old. But it's getting a check mark because it can do more frames in a burst. Now, continuing on with something that is important when it comes to burst mode, we've got the type of SD card slots in these cameras. The R8 has one UHS 2 SD card slot, meaning it just has one slot, whereas the R6 has 2 slots. We have 2 UHS 2 SD slots, and you can write both photos and video to both of those cards, so you have redundancy, and you have the same exact thing here in the R6 Mark II. This is one of those differentiators that might make the difference between going with an R8 or an R6 or an R6 Mark II in your mind. Can you live with one card slot? Are you in a situation where if a card fails and blows up on you, well, you're out of luck? That's just something you have to take into consideration. I've been using the R8 and I've been using the higher end SD cards. I want to use the best cards possible. Also, I want to use the fastest writing cards. You need a V90, an SD card that says V90 on it for the R8 if you want to get the fastest read and write speeds when it comes to shooting at 40 frames per second. You want it to write from the buffer to the card much quicker, and to clear the buffer quicker, you need the faster card. Do not buy cheap cards. Now's a good time to talk about that. Do not buy cheap cards. You don't want cheap cards in any camera. Buy reputable brands. You've got your ProGrade Digital. You have your SanDisk Professional. You have your Lexar. Sony makes cards. Those are going to be your professional types of cards. Just buy the higher end ones. Do not cheap out here. Now, personally, I like having 2 card slots, but at the end of this video, when we hear about the price of the R8, maybe you're gonna consider it. Maybe this is a backup to someone who has an R6 Mark II or an R5 or an R3, and this might be for you. But if you're new into this world and you're deciding what to do, just keep in mind, do you want 2 card slots? Do you want 1 card slot? What are the pros and cons to both? In this case, check marks go to these 2 cameras. Now let's talk about max shutter speeds. The R8 gives you a max shutter speed of 1/4000th of a second with the first curtain electronic, or in electronic shutter mode, always glass, 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 glass. The better the glass, the better opportunity for better images you have. That's always been the way, in my opinion, and that's what I practice in everyday life. The R8 is amazing. If you can't get past a smaller battery and you can't get past the fact that it has only 1 card slot, then maybe you don't go there and you look for something like an R6. But it's hard to point people in the direction of the R6 at this point, especially if you're going to shoot action, because you're getting 40 frames per second. You're getting a faster readout speed with the R8 and the R6 Mark II.
Holding for deployment.
They're both great. Now, all of that I just said is really geared towards the still shooter. When it comes to video, I wouldn't even look at the R6 at this point. The R8 is going to give you more for less money. No, you don't have the IBIS built in, so keep that in mind. But still, the better quality of the video that you're going to get from both of these cameras is why I would lean towards those. Now, if you're someone who has an R6 and you're trying to decide, do you upgrade to an R6 Mark II or do you go and downgrade to an R8? Well, you got to ask yourself, full-time professional, not full-time professional. Really, if you're not, there's no reason to upgrade this. If this is giving you everything that you need, I mean, yeah, it's 2.5 years old, but it's still a great camera. It's going to be a great camera for many years to come. If it's not something that you're full into professionally, there's no reason to not have this. Go buy some more glass, right? Now, I have a friend who shoots a lot of sports, and she had an R6, and she's like, should I get an R3 or an R6 Mark II? And I was like, I really think you need an R3. I mean, you could buy 3 of these for the price of one of those. I don't know why you would even consider, 3 of the R8s for the same price. But I think an R6 Mark II might be a better upgrade for you right now for that 40 frames per second with the faster readout speed. And her feedback right after using the R6 Mark II the first time to shoot sports was, wow, you can actually notice a difference in the autofocus. So if you're a sports shooter, You want to upgrade, keep this as your backup, or sell it for 15, 16, 1700 bucks. Do that, roll into the R6 Mark II because this is a fantastic camera. Honestly, Canon's done a fantastic job across the board. So let me know what you guys think. Which would you go with and why? Thank you very much for watching. Jared PolandPhotosphoto.com. See ya.
Hostile UAV in this sector. Hostile UAV overhead.
Okay, so we're live right now. We mainly want to start this off just making sure that all of our levels are good, that everything's working. Green light from YouTube that set this up correctly.
Your squad mate is
And then
redeploying.
we'll dive
Well
right
done.
in. So let me know in the
Hostile
chat. If there are any issues. It's clipping.
Your dog tag. Move to resecure it. Most wanted contract failed. Your squad mate was KIA.
Movement in this area. Moving.
Great. We're going here in about a minute. Is that clipping for you? We go like right here.
Hostile dropping into the area. Watch the sky.
Going
No
on.
drop.
Taking effective fire!
Holy shit!
Squad mate back on station.
Oh my god, who's in there?
Come on, I killed the man, bitch.
Nicky's
You
online.
have reinforcements inbound.
So what we'll do is the same sort of
Oh,
format
they.
that we
What the fuck?
for these sorts of live
Right
Leave
here.
them alone!
Yes.
where we'll talk about that
Bitch.
first. Then we will get to regular Q&A, and then after that we will get into spicy episodes. But right now, just
Your
before we
team made
get
it to the safe zone.
going here, I want to do the usual thing.
Squad mate is redeploying.
Fuck! Yeah!
Also linked in the description. Shortly thereafter. It should be up there. And of course, if you guys are interested in headphones, that's also where we have the audio files and guide features, educational articles, all that kind of stuff. And it is also a place where you can buy
You have reinforcements inbound.
choose.
Your squad mate's back on station. Good work.
Runs this channel, so if you would like to support us, consider checking this out. So, with that out of the way, let's dive into the HiFiMan H1000 V2. There are many different iterations of this headphone. Oh, and just a disclaimer here: this is a production
Hostile counter UAV overhead.
on loan. This was sent up by Headphones.com, so this is a production unit. And yeah, so let's get into the HiFiMan H1000 V2, and I've seen some already about stealth magnet version. This is not the stealth magnet version that I'm aware of. I believe this is just a regular version.
We're detecting vulnerability in the enemy's network. Locate their uplink stations and secure their intel before they go offline.
It is, guys, so you'll see why. Yeah, I will update. The information. But
You have
this
reinforcements
is the
inbound.
non-stealth for everything that I'm seeing right now. And I actually haven't even seen stealth magnet. But we will talk about the stealth magnet thing in a little bit as well. I think we should do that after this. So for those of you guys who are wondering about the stealth magnets,
Hostile UAV in
first
this
let's
sector.
dive into build, design, comfort, aesthetics. and accessories, and just a quick cable. You get 2 of them. But this is the cable. What the hell is this? This is the, as we affectionately know, like the surgical tube style of cable. So you get one that's a XLR, which is nice, and then you also get a 3.5 or 1/4 inch. Is the stream still working?
Enemy soldier incoming.
Just paused on me. So that's the cable.
Your squad mates back on
not
station.
one that-
Good work.
Go ahead and weak ass.
And the connectors on the bottom.
Hostiles deploy the counter UAV.
So for the rest of the build, the design, let's talk about that. I am not a fan. It's no secret of the sort of wood veneer style thing going on here, right? Like this sort of wood ring. I get why they do it. It's a way for them to, you know, speak that kind of design. Well, I will say this has like a different sort of sheen to the wood than what you find in Susvara.
I'm playing up.
Hostile
Cool.
UAV
Interesting.
active.
And the rest of the
Advise
design
you
is
move
the
to
sort
the
of
safe zone now.
silver metal material, you know, for the yokes as well.
Setting by!
And you get
Hostile UAV in this sector.
leather feeling headbands.
Your
strapped
squad
to
mates
those
back on
headbands.
station. Good work.
You get the
Hostile
clicks
UAV
inside.
active.
Enemy dropping into the AO.
Go all the way
Your
up.
squad mates. Well done.
And it does have couple so the benefit of this is
That one down.
Remaining.
the cups themselves, they have the other high fat and eggy man cups from the past, and you can actually shine light where you need to see kind of through the drive. Big, massive pads, huge openings for ears.
You're being tracked by an enemy squad. Evade and survive. Hostile dropping into the area. Watch the sky. Enemy resecured their network. It's over. Have reinforcements inbound. Fire sale active.
How?
Buy-station items have been reduced. Don't locate the stolen vehicle. Get to it. Tactics to follow.
Yeah, they're coming.
Orbiting the area.
We gotta regroup.
Enemy here.
Deliver the vehicle to the DZ marked on your tap now. Get moving. Get ready. Resurgence window is about to close. You're almost at the DZ. Keep it up. Enemy airstrike incoming. Employ evasive maneuvers.
Hostile counter UAV overhead.
Gas is closing in.
Hostile UAV overhead. Enemy movement.
Enemy soldier incoming. The objective's been compromised. Contract failed. Fire sale's over. Adjusting prices. Your squad mates back on station. Good work.
Moving!
Oh, come on. Man, this gas, bro. This gas.
Well done.
They tagged me!
hard that time.